from there. Actually, this was a great introduction already. So, and taking this opportunity, I would like to actually invite Professor Jonathan Källof, who is a friend of us, a member of our institute, UNESCO chair at the Brunswick University, professor at University of Telford, South Africa, Morocco, and all over the place, basically. So Jonathan will talk to us about foresight and getting senior management by the Canadian with the Canadian government case. So Jonathan, the floor is yours. You may take a few minutes of extra time to complete your presentation, as we have only two distinguished speakers at this session today.
That is wonderful. Thank you, my friend. For those that heard the intro, I am blessed by having many good friends in these different areas. And everything I am, I really do credit to my friends. And so my friends at HSE have brought me into various projects. And you brought me onto Foresight, the journal. My friends in Foresight at UNESCO brought me into the UNESCO program, and we could have a great talk about that. My friends at CI, for example, most of my research in competitive intelligence market insight has the Society of Competitive Intelligence Professionals involved, helping out, and their number two is like a sister to me. So all those wonderful credentials. My South Africa is, I call my partner out there my South African mother. She takes such good care of me and has since the early 90s. I'm blessed of having these friends that want to work together. And that's an important thing to bring up because that really ties into this research. Sure. And so right before COVID, and this is a Canadian environment, me and 5 of my buddies who are leaders in government foresight, they're directors of government foresight programs, are sitting around a table, finally some warm weather in Ottawa, talking about foresight. And they're talking about how their units have gone up and gone down, opened and closed. And we were actually tracing the evolution of it. And at one point, one of them said, look, we're getting old. We want to leave some sort of legacy. Why don't we all work together on understanding how to make foresight better? And again, you're dealing with at the table over 100 years of leadership in the Canadian foresight community. And this is just some of the departments that these folks have been in charge of. We have, and Jack Smith, who we all know and love so well, was the National Science Advisor, was the in the Office of National Science Advisor. He was Canada's Chief Foresight Officer. We have Defense Research that's there, Fisheries and Oceans, National Research Council, National Defense, Canadian Food Inspection Agency. This is a wide breadth of organizations that have at one point had foresight units that these folks have led. And by the way, when I say we're all friends, every conference we go to, we always sit together. And in fact, if you ever seen the Muppet movie or the Muppet Show, it's like we're the old buzzard sitting in the corner cracking jokes as things are going on. We're really that close. There's not much distance. And so the question that went through the group is, why do some foresight programs last longer than others? Why is Horizon Canada, which is our chief office, still in business after all those years, although it's changed what it reports to? Why did some get shut down? Why did fisheries get shut down? Why did National Research Council go up like this, down like this, up like this, and then down like this? And very importantly, because Jack and I in 2010 did a really great study on foresight critical success factors, where the question was, for the units that the foresight community recognizes as the best in the world, right? How did they get that way? We actually interviewed the foresight directors from each of those programs, and we found a common list of factors that we call critical success factors. But again, that explained why the units lasted beyond the mandate of one government. It didn't explain impact. Okay, so again, we weren't at the impact. We were there as to why it was doing well. So again, you've got these folks in Canada who are looking over their careers and going, we really got to have a better handle on why this is going on, especially with so many new people joining Foresight and new leadership coming into play. I'm the academic, so I scour the literature and I go, okay, impact. What's there in impact? And what I found was, well, most studies involve one or a few projects in general are based on the author's personal experience. So, you know, Renee Rohrbeck, who I admire greatly, had a really good article on corporate foresight impact, that it was him and his buddies from the company he was part of sitting around the table basically and going, we think this is why it had impact. The studies that use surveys and interviews, and there have been studies that have said, have you had impact? Generally, if they do surveys and interviews, they're not surveying the people in charge. They're surveying and interviewing those that were involved. So again, when you ask the question, did senior management take advantage of your findings? They have no clue. They're too far removed from that process, whereas the director of the unit will have a better idea. And just so you know how big the disconnect is, I was told by a deputy minister from an agency in Ottawa, she said, I never made a major decision without foresight report. And I know there are foresight people who said, no one listens to us in this department. So I kind of went, no, if you really want to know what's going on, talk to the leader of the unit, because they're the interface with the deputy minister or the director general. Most of those impact studies focused on trying to prove if there was an impact. Identify the types of impacts, direct or indirect. Things like we got people talking that didn't talk before, we introduced ideas, but not what led to the impact. And that really is it. What Jack and I found over the years is that if senior management does not somehow use your findings, you are going to be shut down. They don't have time, they don't have money, they don't have bandwidth to read these reports, unless there's something that's going to be of value to them. And then finally, there's really very little literature on what factors impacted the decision, either directly or indirectly. And so here's from some of the folks in the field. I mean, Dirk Meisner from HSE, who does incredible work, he says, conducting these national foresight studies has been common, but the impact is really unclear. And again, you want to be a good field that's got a long staying capability, you want to be a unit, you got to prove impact. That's in every one of the fields I've looked at. Despite, says Rohrbeck and Kuhn in 218, despite the long tradition of applying CF practices, evidence of impact is scarce. And in fact, Renee and I and Alexander and Kalnin have now started the formation of a group within the UNESCO chairs and others of foresight academics who have done research, who have consulted in foresight, that can put together impact studies and impact stories. And then you got Bourgeois and Set that says systematic impact analysis of future studies is weak. And by the way, that's why I'm so sorry sadly he wasn't here to speak, because his speech was a natural introduction to what I've got here. It's just too bad. So our study addressed these weaknesses. The idea is to have Canadian government senior foresight managers develop a comprehensive list of factors that led to impact. So they've all had stuff that had impact. They had stuff that didn't. Theorize as to what led to impact, and then select a group of recognized leaders. So not just the folks that had around the table, but who do people agree are their go-to folks when they want to know how to run their unit, have them do a Delphi on the list, and then have an expert panel to discuss the results. And once again, you got Brian Colton, who's my co-author on this, who at that point is in charge of NRC, National Research Council's foresight. He's reaching out to friends. So this is not as complicated a study to do, and you're going to see ridiculously high acceptance rates because that's just the nature of friendship and research. So the steering committee, and that was 6 of us, we create a list of factors that impact foresight. And I bring in some of the academic stuff, and they put the list together based on what they've done. And so we developed a list of and we also had to develop a list of the senior level practitioners. So we need to say, here's our prelim list of factors that lead to impact on senior management. And here are the list of senior foresight practitioners, which was a little more difficult than we thought. As part of that phase, and we used lists of people we knew, plus there is a Canadian government scanning group. We have their lists. There's been a couple of groups that have formed. We got 50 plus names off of that. 16 we identified as senior level practitioners. There's a lot of people that come in for a year or two and then leave. It's kind of the standard pattern within the government. Those 16 were asked to assess the impact factor. So we said, okay, you 16, take a look at these lists. I want you to add to it, take away from it. What do you think? And of 16 invited to assess, 11 responded, and the results, 27 impact factors. I'm going to show you that one in a minute. Same thing with picking the experts. We have a steering committee, we have our list, and we say, let's put together who we think are the top people. That was 13. Then we go to the 11 that responded to the first phase of our study of the 16. And we go, take a look at these names. Do you agree with us or not? If you agree, check beside the name. If you don't, put an X. And if you have any other names, put them in. To get a new name on that list required 2 of the 11 to mention it. To get them into our expert panel Delphi required at least 2 to also check it off. 9 names were identified by this group, of which 8 agreed to participate. So again, that's why I said ridiculously high acceptance rates, but that's just the nature of the beast. So the Delphis, shouldn't surprise anybody here. First round, the experts were asked to assign an importance to each factor from 1 to 5, not important to important, very important. They were also asked to add additional factors to the list that they thought were important. So again, we added things, the 11 added things, and then we said, now that we got this smaller group of leaders who know when they've had impact or not, what do you think? And they added 11 additional factors. So we had a really good comprehensive list of these factors. Now, again, that's factors that lead to acceptance of foresight by senior managers, not factors that lead to good foresight. Peter Bishop has got a great book with Andy Hines listing lots and lots of factors. The EU, as part of FP7, put up a website. We have comprehensive lists of how do you do good foresight. That's not what this is about. In fact, I'd venture to say I've seen bad foresight studies get implemented by senior managers and good foresight studies get rejected. However, we had our list and we gave it to them once, and then we gave it to them the second time. We said, here's the average from round 1. What do you think? Number 1 was a good understanding of the decision makers' pain points. Number 2, direct links to senior management. Number 3, and again, I'm not going to go down all this list, but it tracks nicely with the CSF findings that we've had for making a unit last for a long time. So it seems very straightforward. You do a Delphi, you take a look what's going on, you get a list, and that's a good study on its own right. I'm glad to put that in. But then we had an expert panel, and we said, okay, you want to dig deep into that one. We also brought in a couple of subject matter experts, including Peter Bishop, including Alex Wilner, who's done some great foresight work. And we started off by saying, I want each of you to recount 1 or 2 examples of where foresight impacted senior management decisions and why they thought of. So tell us a happy story, tell us a sad story. Then we give them the top impact factors. Would you agree? Do you not disagree? Talk about it. But then we gave them, and this is where it gets interesting. I'm going to put this list up. You know how in Delphi's your answers get closer? In this one, it got further apart. All right? We have 8 experts. And I want you to think of this. Of the 8 experts, when we ask them, here's the factor, senior managers are trained to understand foresight and how to use it. This is Rial Mello's foresight literacy. We say this is an important factor. It actually had of the 8 scores of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Everything had been clicked off by somebody. 22 of the questions, of the indicators, had at least 3 different responses. Only 8 had 1 or 2 responses, a 4 and a 5, or 2 or 3, or 1 or 2. This was really brought apart. So 7 factors only had 2 different responses. And again, this is with 8 people. So it's getting more and more divergent. So this became a very, very important element of the expert panel. And what became clear, and this is what we're writing it up, is that as we look at what are the factors that lead to impact, and we've done a good job of theorizing factors, looking at certain factors, key success factor, the whole bit, what the reality is when you start talking to the foresight leaders, and you heard the stories. So you have one guy who's heading up Foresight Department of National Defense, and he says, foresight might as well be in our department's mandate. Everything is about the future of the soldier, the future in research, the future of battle. I don't even have to use the word foresight. The next guy who speaks, and I'm not going to name his department, he says, on Monday morning, you know what senior manager is concerned about? And people said, what? They said, what's happening by Monday noon? And Monday noon, they're worried about Monday afternoon. They don't really care to hear anything beyond what's happening in the next 6 to 7 hours. And he said, there's no point proving foresight literacy for them because they just don't care. Their attitude is wrong. And so we started noticing that as they told their stories, and even transition stories, we changed deputy ministers, we changed ministers, there was a clear dichotomy, between departments that had a short-term orientation versus a long-term. So you would expect that a science-based ministry will likely have a long-term orientation, whereas an industry minister is likely going to be focused on short to medium-term commercialization. And we have a lot of stories about this. But then we had this concept of your deputy minister ADM being either a foresight champion, they care about the long-term, they see this as important, or foresight neutral, or actually foresight negative. And we're trying to choose our terms carefully because when we write it up, we don't want people to think we're criticizing deputy ministers. Rather, we're trying to classify them. And so if you take a look at what's going on, this is back to literacy training, if they were long-time oriented and they were foresight champions, senior management awareness literacy training isn't important. Their head is already there. They might not call it foresight, but they know the value of it. On the other hand, if you had a short-term mandate and you were foresight neutral or negative, what's the point? They're all negative about this concept. It was largely in areas such as long-term orientation, foresight neutral or negative, that it made sense to put that into play. So again, there's a nice little interplay of that. As we went on, and I'm going to wrap this up very shortly, we decided to take one department that we all knew very well, called the National Research Council. And you're going to see down here different eras. Around the table are the people that ran the units during that period of time. So this is not hypothesizing, this is from the horse's mouth. 94 to 2004, Art Carty is in charge of the National Research Council. He was foresight champion. Such a foresight champion that APIC put him on the Foresight Advisory Committee. Such a champion that he brought it to the Privy Council office. And the mandate orientation of the NRC at that point was long-term. Long-term research was the focus of it. Foresight grew dramatically during that area, and it had a lot of impact. That was, I'll call it the Jack Smith era of foresight. Art Carty leaves, and he takes Jack with him to PCO, Privy Council office, then Industry Canada, and a new president comes in who's not a foresight champion. And at the same time, we get a new prime minister who says, look, we got to move more towards medium-term horizons. We need to, not commercialization, but development at best. So time frame went down and champions gone down. So not surprisingly, impact went down to foresight, but intelligence, technical intelligence starts going up because that fits the temporal orientation of what's going on. In 2010 to 2016, John McDougall came in, and John McDougall put the foresight unit into Alberta Research Council. He's a huge, huge champion for foresight. He's pushing it, but at the same time, the prime minister goes, no, this is about commercialization. We have got to commercialize. And when I toured NRC facilities and met with folks around Canada, they were all talking about having to change their plans to show how they could get commercialization out of what they were doing. Even though you had a foresight champion who tried to drive impact, it starts going down, then it starts going up because John is really pushing it. John then is forced out, and Ian Stewart goes in, not a foresight champion. NRC is medium term, and this is where it gets interesting. Foresight's impact went way down until they changed their name to S&T Outlook. And once they changed their name to S&T Outlook and they put foresight and intelligence and research all under one umbrella, demand starts going up. But I was told in those days, and that's 260 to 220, do not use the foresight word. You cannot do that. And we can't bring in people that they know are foresight because that is going to kill it. So once again, what we saw, and this goes back to validation of the expert panel, was that it's not so simple as to say, these are the factors, here's the checklist, but it's a conditional model that relies on the orientation, the mandate of the department, and the orientation mandate of the senior executive. And I suspect that if we look at this in corporate foresight units, we're going to see the exact same thing. And I've talked to enough corporate foresight managers that I really think I can do this. In terms of future research, one of my buddies has said, I got good connectivity with a lot of deputy ministers. Why don't we take the list of the deputy ministers of the model and see what they think of it? And what's interesting there is we might actually start talking as a group about going away from the foresight impact literature and more towards the how do you impact senior management decisions. There's a rich literature of that. There's a lot of books, there's a lot of journals, and just say, hey, in general, if you tried to provide strategic advice to the top levels of government, how you actually make that happen. We're going to have to look at the senior management impact literature and compare it to this study's results. And we're also going to have to see if the results can be generalized beyond the Canadian government. So if we applied this in other countries, would we see the same ebb and flow? If we looked at other provinces, Alberta comes to mind, would we say the same thing? But again, Canada is a unique place to try this, A, because we have a rich history with foresight, and that's been written up in several articles. B, because there's multiple units, there's lots of them. And C, because we generally like each other. So we get through a lot of the crap. By the way, this study cost us a grand total of $0 to put together, unless I count the coffee, then it goes up rather significantly. And it's driven by the practitioners themselves. And I'm just putting out that it's not a bad model in research to say, let's get academia and let's get practitioners together and start tossing around ideas, finding out their pain points, the problems they're having, learn from them. And I'm going to end it on that note. I was glad I had a few extra minutes. I hope I've given you enough to think about here. And again, I can certainly send anybody who wants to, not the PowerPoint, but all the detailed, what we got out of each of the pieces.
Many thanks, Jonathan. That was a great presentation. Actually, it's proved once again that foresight is a soft system because it's involves people and people's behaviors, attitudes, their experience, values, how much they believe on what they are doing, etc., may have effects on the whole foresight process. So you may create a great success story or a great disaster as a result of that. And there are both cases. So, and you also have a lot of experience, I mean, not only in Canada, but all over the world. So how do you compare, like, did you see some other examples where there were some foresight cases which didn't end up because there wasn't strong leadership or there wasn't a champion or...
Oh, most definitely. And this is back to why I love HSE so much, is that twice a year, you bring together people from Brazil, South Africa that are running foresight programs. So we've heard these stories, anecdotal, but it hasn't been studied in a manner that allows us to put it in. And again, you talk about, we always rave about our methodologies. Well, the last factor, 2.4, consistently low, is methodologies that decision makers can't do. methodologists, facilitators, all those strong technical skills become, management doesn't care.
Mm-hmm.
They don't care how you did it as long as you do a good job, yet we really push on that one. And that's a good foresight. So yes, I've seen it in other countries. That's why I said I'm pretty sure if we try to replicate it, we're going to make it happen. Now, the problem in replicating it, so there was a really great study on the impact of Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And you've just heard a great presentation on that. The results said not much of an impact.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem was that who they interviewed were people who had helped organize the surveys and not the people that knew. So there'd be very interesting to go, let's actually go to the senior levels of that group, because the stories we're hearing are not good stories. There's a lot of countries where you're not hearing good stories. You're hearing, we have a foresight unit because you have to. And that's it. The Canadian Central Foresight Unit, and this is enough years away that I can mention this. So it was the era where I was secret cleared. Horizons Canada was going to be shut down. Okay, so in one of those areas that I gave you, the Prime Minister not only said go short term, he said cut.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have the PowerPoint presentation. In the minister's office, they discussed shutting it down. The question everybody had in their head, and only one person knew the answer, they said, what does this unit do? Nobody had ever heard of it before. And then the minister asked how many PYs, person years, were in the unit. When he found out how few there were, he goes, oh, it's not going to make a difference. Let's not worry about it. So they survived only because they were too small in government terms to really matter. And, now they've got a lot more employees. They have a deputy minister committee. They got impact. So again, even tracing that central unit and what's been going on has been really, really cool. So we could sit around the table, you and I, and others that are listening in, and probably over coffee or something stronger, put our stories together. But we still need to go to the folks that were at the top of that and say, does this resonate with you?
Mm-hmm.
And back to what I was saying beforehand, this group we're putting together on professors who are involved with impact-related research, who do foresight programs for government and industry. The group that we're coming together actually has the legitimacy to be the people you interview, because they've actually been the folks that have provided that advice at the top level. And we've all recognized that in the absence of these stories from the top levels, this becomes a really difficult field to sustain in the long term.
Fantastic. I mean, even if you apply the same foresight methodology in two different places, you will never get the same results. So it can be anything.
No, that's exactly it.
Many thanks. Thanks, Jonathan. This was
You're very welcome. Thank you. I'm glad we had a little bit more
valuable
time.
insights from Canada. So we can now move to our next speaker. So I'd like to introduce Dr. Jean-Paul Pinto. He's a consultant and teacher in imagination and materialization of future, and specializing on science fiction and speculative design. He has a master's degree in marketing from the University of Capitole, Toulouse, a master in perspective by the CNAM, Paris, and master in security and defense by the Institute of High National Studies of Ecuador. So he has a PhD in business administration at the University de la Valle. So Jean-Paul, you are with us. So is our next speaker from Americas. He's coming all the way from Ecuador, Quito, right?
Right.
So
that's right.
Okay. So the floor is yours, Jean-Paul. Looking forward to your colorful presentation.
Thank you very much, Ozdchan. I'm very honored to be here today. I am going to talk about the relationship between science fiction and foresight. I want to show you that they work about the same goals, the same field, the same things. For me, science fiction is like doing foresight in a different way, in different kind of way. That's all, with more creativity, more impact on decisions, more impact on innovation. That's all. It's a different way of doing some foresight. So I will present some problems that I found during my PhD research So there are a lot of problems in the discipline, like Jonathan said some minutes before. For example, we have a little problem in foresight sometimes. There are little creativity in the presentation of the scenarios. So science fiction can help us to solve that, because when you use science fiction, you can produce more creative scenarios in films, in movies, in books and things like that. And like Jonathan said, there is a little problem in foresight. You have sometimes little impact on innovation. And you can find a lot of examples on how science fiction can introduce innovation. A lot of things that you use today, that you have right now in reality, they exist before in science fiction. And then someone, an engineer or something like that, take that idea in science fiction and put it in reality. So with science fiction, you have more impact on innovation. Other problem that we have in foresight is that the future do not exist, okay? The future has a problem of tangibility. And with science fiction, we can solve that, because you can see the future in films, in books. You can see the future, different alternatives about the future. Also, something that I like a lot is that in science fiction, you can see in a better way ruptures, risk, uncertainty, consequence about risk. So science fiction can help foresight in order to see clearest what about the risks of the future, what the consequence of that kind of risks. So I think that science fiction can help us to solve different problems about foresight. Another one could be sometimes in foresight, we abuse about the use of desired scenarios. And in science fiction, there is a lot of scenarios about dystopian situations. So in that way, you are not only to focus on desired scenarios, you can focus too in dystopian situations, in the worst case scenario. So it could be a good complement for foresight to use science fiction. And what about using science fiction in future studies? I will show you that they are working, like I said, in the same goals, in the same things. For example, there is a famous word about Bertrand de Jouvenel, conjectures, conjecture in French. So when you are using science fiction, you produce conjectures. And the same thing in foresight. So they are working in the same concepts, in the same goals. For example, you have in science fiction the question of prevent, alert, risk, and it's the same in foresight. When I am building some foresight scenarios, I want the people to be alert, to prevent people, to change, to make transformations in organizations. So as you can see, they are working in the same things. They want people be alert, to prevent people, to show people risk, threats about the future. For example, like Jonathan said, and it's very important, when we are making some foresight work, we want people to react, to have an impact on people, on seniors, right? Agency. So with science fiction, we want to produce the same effect, because we want people to be afraid, for example, in dystopian situations. And the goal beside that is that people can react. They are going to do different things in the future, to take different decisions that it will prevent that dystopian situations will occur in the present. And this is what we can see in this painting. Sandro Botticelli is based in the novel about the hell, Dante, where he's representing hell, heaven. So when we are doing science fiction, we want that people be afraid about dystopian situations, right? And the same is in foresight. When we are producing the worst case scenario, we want people to be afraid, to alert people, that people can react about that kind of scenarios and they take decisions. You probably agree with me. Foresight is about taking decisions. It's right, you make scenarios, we make different situations, alternative futures, but the most important thing in foresight is decisions. So this kind of paintings, like in the past, when they want that people believe in God, they be afraid about hell, it's the same in foresight and science fiction. We want people to be afraid about something, and people react and take decisions about this kind of situations. And when I was doing my research, I found a lot of researchers, authors, that they were talking about science fiction, but it was the same word that they use in foresight. And for example, when you are using science fiction, you want to produce greater impact. We are talking about problematization, hypothesis, experience. It's the same in foresight. So I found that we are using the same language. We want to alert, we want to analyze consequence, effects, and we have the same question in foresight and science fiction. What if? What would happen in the future? What would be the options, the alternatives about the futures? So it's the same. We're working in the same field with the same tools. It's just a difference between science fiction and foresight. It's like science fiction is working more on creativity, on imagination, on impact, on innovation. That's all. It's another way of doing some foresight work. For example, you have to the ethical problem, the political reflection, like you can see in this diapositive. So when I was doing my research, I found that there were a lot of similarities between foresight and science fiction. Consequence, prevent, alert, dystopian situations, prevent these negative events from occurring, seek to alert humanity. It's the same. Foresight and science fiction want to produce the same effects. They are working about the same goals to prevent the worst from happening, like Lecoq said. So they are working the same goals, but in a different way. That's so. And if we can analyze about, for example, dystopian, it's like I said about the painting of Botticelli. A dystopia is developed to make people afraid and make them react. This sentence could be applied to both fields, to science fiction and to foresight. So, like the Juvenal said some time ago, we want people to be responsible about the future. Science fiction, when they present a dystopian situation, they want to people react, and they want that people be responsible about the consequence, for example, about climate change. So foresight and science fiction they pursue that people will be more responsible about what could happen in the future. And like I said, for example, I found the famous company, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and they encourage the use of science fiction in business organizations. And the Harvard Business Review, they say that they stimulate. They say that business leaders need to read more science fiction in order to innovate, to create more different ideas about the future, alternative futures. And if you see some technological companies, the famous one, Google, Microsoft, Apple, their research team are working with science fiction writer. So it's very interesting because it's like a perfect marriage. In one side, you have researchers about those kind of companies, and the other side, you have science fiction writers. And I can talk about other examples. We have iPhone, we have Kindle, people that create Kindle, for example, the design of Kindle, they say that they were inspired about a Stephenson book, The Diamond Age. And you have other companies, Boeing, NAG, Ford, Intel. You have Brian Johnson, that he used to apply the science fiction prototyping. So there are a lot of examples of companies right now that are using science fiction to analyze the risk, the consequence of climate change, about the end of humanity, and things like that. And if you are going to the security field, you have, for example, in France, the French army, they are hiring more and more science fiction writers, and they call this project the Red Team. And you have the same case in USA Army. They are hiring more and more science fiction writers about zombies. They write novels about zombies because they want to prepare about unusual risks, unusual threats. So they are using this kind of methodologies to be more prepared about the risks and threats about the future. And I want to give some examples about some novels in science fiction that help us to see alternative futures, alternative worlds. For example, science fiction can let us to think about alternative societies. This is an example of Ursula Le Guin, about her novel, The Dispossessed. We have a frugal economy system. They don't consume anything that they don't need. So maybe we can use that kind of novels to think about how could be the society in the future, how could be the society that we need in the future. So we have a lot of examples. And it's the same, for example, in Prevent and Alert. I will talk about the novel from John Brunner, Stand on Some Silver, about the risk of overpopulation. We are now 8,000 million people in the world. That is good, that is bad. That's something that we have to analyze. And for example, we have also the novel about Philip Dick and Do the Androids Dream about electric trips that go to a movie, Blade Runner. And it's interesting because the novel and the book talks about what could happen if a society have a nuclear attack, how they will survive. What about food, water, air, and things like that? So science fiction makes us think, react, say that it's a good idea, it's a bad idea to have a nuclear war, things like that. So it's interesting because we can see the future. We can see the possible future and make us react. I need to say, like I said, like a supermarket. So science fiction is a supermarket. For example, what would happen if water will disappear? Like in Dune from Frank Herbert. What about terraformation of other planets? The dream of Elon Musk. We need to live in the space because the life in Earth will disappear. So with the novels about science fiction, we are seeing the future. We are seeing what could be if we can live in Mars, for example. And what about virtuality? What would happen in the future? We will prefer to live in total virtuality. That's good, that's bad. So we can see that in fiction and then take decisions. I prefer to live in virtuality. I prefer to live in reality. What about other people? And it's the same thing with technologies. For example, I can use the meaning of luxury communism. What could happen in the future if the machines, the intelligence, artificial intelligence will control everything, and human beings will only produce poetry, music, because they will be not able to work? So what could be a world like that? We will want that? Is a dystopian situation, a utopian situation? So science fiction presents us the future, produce different kinds of scenarios of futures, so we can decide how do we prefer to live in the future. And in the education is the same thing. For example, some days ago I was talking about this, and I said maybe in the future we can teach people with video games. That could be a possibility. No more boring classes. We can teach people with video games. That could be another good possibility. And in the security is the same. What would happen if jails will not exist anymore? Because jails is not the solution. As we see in our countries in Latin America, jails are not a good solution. So, but what can we use to replace jails in the future? And in Black Mirror, in Netflix, in the White Bear episode, you can see an alternative, someone different about having jails. And what about immortality? It's a good idea, a bad idea. So in Altered Carbon, the series about Altered Carbon, you can see the good points, the bad points about being immortal in the future. So as you can see, science fiction presents us different kind of scenarios, different options. You can see the future, and that's very good for foresight because it's a good complement. It makes a better work about foresight. And some years ago, I did this work in Cali, Colombia. I wrote some little stories, science fiction stories, and a friend of mine, Dario Bolivar, he made some drawings about my stories. And that's, for example, this is the case of education. You have a student alone at home, no more teachers, just screens, just artificial intelligence, that's all. So this the goal of this kind of drawings is make us react, to make us think. This is good, this is bad, this dystopian situation, the utopian situation. What we want about the future, what kind of future we want to create, to build. So science fiction presents us the future. We can see the future, and then we have to take some decisions about what we want in the future. And finally, I want to present my last book, 2050, when I wrote some science fiction, and I present 7 futures for humanity. A good one, bad one, dystopian situations, utopian situations. I hope that next year will be translated in English. So Ozdchan, I will send it to you, of course, and I hope that you can read it because I will present 7 possibilities for humanity for the next 30 years. That's it. I want to take more minutes. So just I want to finish about this great idea. Sometimes in my conference, I use masks, the V for Vendetta mask, for example. And I said always in my conference, behind this mask, there is more than just flesh. Beneath this mask, there is an idea. And ideas are bulletproof. Thank you a lot. Thank you, Ozdchan, for the invitation.
Thank you. Thanks, Jean-Paul. That's great. That's very inspirational. Actually, there's one comment in here from Ian Miles. He's also like a great fan of science fiction. Not only fan, he knows a lot about it, and he's been also applying these ideas in foresight. So, Ian, would you like to comment at this point?
Yes. Can you read the comment, please, so I can?
Yeah, maybe Ian can join us. Actually, I'm just
sure.
trying to see if I can have him here. So, Ian, do you hear us?
Trying to come in. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, we hear you.
Yeah. Oh, well,
Okay.
First to say that was a brilliant presentation. And I must say some of the ideas that are in science fiction seem to me to be relatively neglected still in future studies, where they could be a lot more prominent. And in particular, I think of space technology, where the idea of space elevators has been around for a long time. Arthur C. Clarke famously wrote about this. It never seems to appear in future studies which look at aerospace and other futures. But the point, I was going to make a comment really, and the comment was that a lot of good science fiction actually draws on future studies. And you mentioned one example yourself, Stand on Zanzibar. Stand on Zanzibar clearly draws on limits to growth. It even has computer modeling featured within it. And then Brunner went on to write Shockwave Rider. And Shockwave Rider was very much drawing on Toffler's work in Future Shock and elsewhere. It's even in the title. So the flow can be two ways. And there are times where future studies actually grasp things earlier than science fiction, and I think nanotechnology in particular. One thing, there isn't much science fiction here. Neil Stephenson's Diamond Age is a great exception, but that followed on quite a lot of work talking about how important this technology was going to be and what revolutions it would introduce. And I think Stephenson himself talks about this influence, not in the book, but in his other work. I was simply trying to make the point that it can be a two-way flow. And I suspect that both areas have blind spots. And a major blind spot, I would say, for a very long time was around information technology, where we did have some discussion of virtual reality in science fiction. We had a lot of discussion of computers and robots, but the idea of much more distributed computing, of ambient intelligence in the jargon, or one set of jargon, that we will be surrounded by intelligent devices of one sort or another, hardly appeared in science fiction. In fact, it's still nothing like as prominent as you might expect. But it wasn't in future studies either for a very long time. They were talking about robotics, but it's humanoid robotics. They were talking about large computer networks rather than a lot of distributed computing. So I guess what I'm saying is that we need science fiction, we need future studies, and we still need much more creativity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with Jan. Thank you for your comment, Jan, because we need more creativity, more imagination. So we have to use more tools that make more creative scenarios that can add more imagination to our work. And like Ian might said, some is very sad because you have a lot of alert in science fiction, but governments, companies do not pay attention. Maybe they think that this is not going to happen. It's impossible. It's not going to happen. So it's very sad because we are producing a lot of different scenarios to alert, to prevent, but it's not so worthy because decisions are not taken about those kinds of scenarios.
Can I just add one story that is
Yes.
that I know is accurate? We failed to prepare for the COVID pandemic. Our Minister for Health had seen the film Contagion. This did not make him prepare for the pandemic, but he did use that film as a way of guiding his strategic response when the pandemic happened. He knew about things like PPE, face masks, search for vaccines, all of these things, as a result of having seen a science fiction film. Not paying attention to there were actually future studies. He didn't pay attention to the future studies.
Yes.
Yeah. But no, well, better later than never. So, Alexander, you have a comment also?
Yeah, I have a comment on the question, actually. Sure. In fact, first of all, I enjoyed very much. My congratulations. Yeah, it was very, very interesting. Excellent. Yeah. But and I recalled immediately Michio Kaku, you know him, yeah? Michio Kaku, Japanese guy, physicist, who told that everything which doesn't contradict laws of physics will sooner or later be realized. Yeah, and it means that even the most fantastic things might happen in the future. And in fact, what is good in this science fiction is that it's always a narrative, which is very important, because you don't just show that might happen something. I don't know, something will be invented, or something will happen, a kind of explosion. But you see the picture as a whole, how people behave, how it's related to different to other issues there, and it gives you a big picture, not just individual fact, which is very important. Yeah, and of course I fully agree about the creativity. By the way, tomorrow and the day after tomorrow we'll have a conference on creativity, creative industries. So I kindly invited you. Mm-hmm. But my question was an idea, maybe. Do you have maybe you or maybe somebody else did a kind of collected different facts, issues, I don't know what, everything about future from science fiction? It might be a very good set of trends, of wild cards, whatever, new inventions, whatever. Even they might be considered as they will never happen. Do you have any, maybe somebody you know already did this, or at least wanted to do this?
I'm not sure about the question because the sound is not so good. So are you talking about examples of something that exists in science fiction and then goes to foresight, to the reality? That's what you are talking about?
No, I'm talking about, look, we develop, for example, in our institute, we develop a database of wildcards. We have now a collection there which are well described with different classification, with a rather developed classification. Just a few hours ago, we had a presentation about this. In the previous few hours ago, it doesn't matter, yeah. And we have a description of these shocks, future shocks or future wildcards. And probably in science fiction, we can find many more future shocks. One point. Another point, we have another database of trends, societal trends, I don't know, technological trends, whatever, environmental. And also we can probably find something in science fiction, something about this. I mean that we will, if we study systematically science fiction, we can probably find a lot of issues or maybe events, future events, which we should know about, because many there were questions earlier today about what about unknown unknowns or known unknowns or unknown unknowns, whatever, yeah. And this is a good point, good source of information to know more about unknowns.
Yes.
Yeah, this was my point. Yeah.
Okay, you have different examples, but for example, you have the film Minority Report, when you can see all of the worlds of cyberpunk about what could happen in the future. We'll have societies with a lot of technologies, but with a lot of social problems. So that's an interesting rupture that can be produced in the future. So for one example would be, I think, Minority Report, and the book beside the movie, Do the Androids Dream About Electric Ships, about what could happen about the nuclear war. So in different kind of movies and books about Philip Dick, for example, you have that kind of wild cards. So what could happen if in some place, some country, there will be a nuclear accident? So what will do the society to survive, to provide food, water, air, to continue to work, to continue to live, values, rules, everything. So yes, you can find different kind of appreciations. And Jan Mai says to us in the chat about aliens, for example. I will talk about the book from Ray Bradbury, Chronics from Mars, and then he presents us different scenarios about an encounter between human beings and aliens, people from Mars, and we can see what could be the possibility. Good ones, bad ones. They will be very friendly. They will be very aggressive. They are going to kill us. So it's interesting because that make us think about what could happen in the future. Yeah, Elon Musk wants to put 1 million persons in the space. So this is good, this is bad. What could happen if we find other civilizations, other kind of people around there? So yes, you can, in science fiction, you can find a lot of wild cards, different ones, about the end of the world. I would suggest a book from Yannick Rumpala from France about the end of the world. He presented a lot of books and novels about what could happen if the life in the earth will disappear. And in the other way, about innovation, I will suggest the book about Thomas Michaud, when he presents what about a lot of products and services that you use in real life, that they exist before in science fiction, and then they are now in reality.
Okay, thank you. By the way, if your book is available in Spanish even, yeah, could you send me the link? Yeah, it would be very interesting to read. I read a little bit Spanish, yeah, so it would be interesting.
Yes, Alexander, are you able to hear me?
Yes, sure.
Oh, good, because my camera doesn't seem to work. Avi Brooks has been introducing science fiction into the work that he does. And when we talked about it, I actually suggested that he contact a few of the Hollywood producers to have them use foresight techniques to build science fiction movies, do it the other way around. So I've been talking to a couple of my production buddies about that one, and we'll see whether we can broker something to bring foresight into Hollywood as opposed to Hollywood into foresight.
Okay, great.
Steven Spielberg did that in the film Minority Report. He hired some foresight people to imagine the cities of the future, for example, the transports of the future. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. That's very good. Thanks, everyone. So congratulations again, Jean-Paul, for the new book. We are looking forward to receiving it. So actually, I said earlier that we have 2 distinguished speakers in this session, but we have a 3rd distinguished speaker now also joining us. So fasten your seatbelts. Now we are flying to South Africa from Americas. So Mulungisi, are you here?
Oh.
So I saw you a few minutes ago. I'm hoping that you are with us.
Yes, hear me.
Yes, we hear you and we see you. Very good.
Oh no,
Welcome.
thank you. our apologies later on, colleagues. We're experiencing challenges, energy challenge, security challenges, as you can imagine. So we had load shedding. Colleagues, we've shared the copy of our presentation, which should be available on the net.
Yes, it's on our screen now, Mulungisi.
Yes.
So,
yeah, I wanted to share with colleagues the extent to which we have now utilized the outcome of our foresight exercise into shaping the future of South Africa through its new decadal plan. I think Alexandra, Ozdchan, and myself at some point, we had indicated the intention of the foresight exercise. At least now I want to draw from the plan that is about to be approved as a future plan of South Africa. It also gives a concrete evidence of how foresight exercise, at least in South Africa, has been taken up, which is a positive development. Of course, we would have liked it, Ozdchan, if all other elements of what we had suggested were fully embraced. But nevertheless, maybe let's move to the next slide. Yes, colleagues. So it's just a context which you are much more familiar with, which we are also trying to draw lessons from COVID-19 pandemic, which is still lingering. But really the question for us is the extent to which those lessons that we continue to draw from COVID could be applied in tackling the climate change or sustainability challenges that we are confronted with. And then, of course, the role of strategic foresight exercise has been identified as critical if we were to move forward in tackling the big societal challenges and the role of international collaboration. So let's move to the next one. Colleagues, essentially this is the essence of our new decadal plan for science, technology, and innovation in South Africa. We seek to build on the successes of what we have been able to achieve in the recent past, at least since 1996, but also just pivot the system to achieve an accelerated and a transformative, inclusive, and sustainable socio-economic development. The emphasis being on trying to achieve the equilibrium between impact and continuing investment in developing the system. So some critical enablers to the system, we identify knowledge creation and the building of institutions. The decadal plan does two things. It identifies what we call broad, about 3 societal grand challenges, and then it set priorities. It also identifies or emphasizes a strong role for international cooperation with greater emphasis on science diplomacy. And it proposes a range of new governance interventions, as well as building a strong monitoring and evaluation, of which foresight exercise is being or has been identified as a critical element of that system making arrangement. The next slide, Ozdchan. Colleagues, just to indicate to those who are not familiar with our foresight exercise, on your left are the 9 foresight outcomes which resulted from our process. And then, of course, in the middle, it's how the different foresight outcomes were taken and considered, thus setting the STI priorities. So with circular economy and digital economy having been identified as potentially providing or going to serve as new sources of growth, sustainable energy being another priority, and then of course health, innovation, and the modernization of existing sectors like mining, agriculture. And then of course the three big grand challenges we have identified: climate change, the education for the future, including the world of work, as well as the future of society. So these three societal grand challenges, because of their complexity and the impact that they're likely to have, we are now going to set up a process by which all relevant stakeholders will participate in further developing these big grand challenges and sort of make sure that they are able to be translated into concrete targets and prioritization, and they are implemented across various sectors of our economy. So this slide really, it's the core of what we're seeking to present, demonstrating the alignment or the extent to which foresight outcomes have been considered or not considered, and what are the next steps going forward. The next slide. So just for colleagues to appreciate, and we do it for the rest of, so we are just illustrating what could potentially be the content of the various, of the three grand challenges, which, as I said, will now undergo a rigorous process of unpacking and further development. Let's move to the next slide. So I did speak to these new sources of growth, which is circular economy and digital economy, which would play a big role in the reindustrialization of our economy, and of course drawing heavily from our knowledge and innovation interventions, but also because of the nature of our economy, we would like to modernize those sectors that have been the backdrop of our economy, such as mining, agriculture, as well as manufacturing. Our key focus, of course, given our unemployment and inequality challenges, we also want to make sure that we improve or we address employment losses, especially in these sectors that have been bleeding job losses, but also we're building a very strong small, medium enterprises. And we would like those SMMEs, or would like STI to be a key component, or to shape the content of SMMEs and to strengthen both the local and regional innovation systems. And let's move, Ozdchan. Yes, and then we are developing new big STI programs. For instance, research and innovation for a healthy population, research and innovation for energy security, and of course, we do seek to make sure that all our communities are able to benefit, but we also want to use the system to improve the role of STI in realizing green transitions, which we are committed to contribute. And then, of course, health is a big issue, as we all know, and we are also having our own challenges in this country, such as HIV/AIDS, but we are also having a geographical advantage of having biodiversity as well as indigenous knowledge systems, which we're seeking to tap into in our quest to build a rigorous research and innovation program to help us achieve a healthy population. Let's move, Oscar. And then, of course, colleagues, we want to strengthen our state so that it's much more, it functions much more better and effectively, and integrate various elements, especially at a local government level, through what we call a district development model. And we want to foreground that model using STI, and we want local techno entrepreneurs and innovators to benefit from our research and innovation programs for capable and inclusive state. But we also want to strengthen the capacity of the science system to inform society. So we are drawing from the lessons learned through the pandemic, and we are capitalizing on the benefits that COVID offered to the science system. And we would like to use that to strengthen and improve decision-making using evidence, at least. But also to make sure that we draw from the capabilities, the science capabilities, such as satellite data to inform land use planning. So there are various dimensions in which we think science can be able, if nurtured properly, to inform and shape our society going forward. Let's move to the next one, Oscar. This is just an illustration. The next slides, colleagues, are building on what we've already indicated earlier on. For an example, this is how we are thinking of utilizing what the Foresight exercise had recommended, the ICT-based applications in modernizing the various sectors. So we're just giving colleagues a sense of what we are having in mind when it comes to agriculture, manufacturing and mining, and how we envisage. And the next slide reflects on what is currently being done in South Africa in terms of our journey towards realizing an inclusive net zero carbon economic growth by 2015, because a number of interventions are being planned, and they are going to constitute part of our new efforts as we move forward. But we're working collaboratively with both our regional as well as continental partners, as well as our international partners, such as the Global Center for Green Product Manufacturing, in our quest to realize the objectives that we have set ourselves. We have also engaged a range of stakeholders, both from the business, government, state-owned entities, and we have mapped the various interests for all these stakeholders, be it in terms of ensuring private sector capacity and infrastructure, or in terms of human capital, or mobilizing research infrastructure. We are building a strong base from which to make sure that we are utilizing energy STI to ensure that we realize the objectives of of moving towards a greener transitions in the various sectors. Let's move to the next one. Again, this is just an example of how we've pulled together various initiatives to constitute what we call an energy RDI programs, which are forming the basis of us moving forward. and realizing some of the outputs of our foresight exercise. Let's move to the next one, Oscar. Colleagues will be familiar with the story around vaccine development and vaccine accessibility, which was the big issue during COVID. And of course, as a consequence of that process, South Africa is working collaboratively with other partners in terms of making sure that we are able to develop what you call priority technology platforms, which would help us to realize our national vaccine development and manufacturing strategy. And I may add, colleagues, maybe Oscar and Alexander, to share with colleagues that subsequent to the foresight exercise, we also did, working with you through your help, we did an analysis where we were mapping the various priority domains which we have identified on 12 dimensions of socio-economic development, and we worked with stakeholders. Now, which then led to the identification of national vaccine development and manufacturing strategies as a key priority that South Africa should be prioritizing. So it's one of those areas that we feel very grateful that our foresight exercise, as well as subsequent analysis that we together with you, Oscar and Alexandra, we were able to identify, and it's now being taken up, and it's being developed. And then, of course, working with various partners in the space of mRNA will be critical in making sure that we are able to realize a vaccine development that will benefit not only South Africa, but the rest of the continent. Let's move to the next slide. So, of course, I indicated that international cooperation is vitally important in the work that we do. It's also going to be an essential element of our new decadal plan. As the saying goes, that science knows no borders. So this slide captures essentially what we are trying to do. We are emphasizing on science diplomacy, which has the following elements, where we are using our collaborations to advance the African agenda for science and innovation, which is intended to support initiatives by the African Union as well as the Southern African Development Community, and of course the BRICS initiatives, which we are part of, and other international partnerships that we are part of as South Africa. Let's move to the next one. So again, this slide is just building on the previous one. It's about how we envisage international cooperation, the role that it can play, which includes attracting foreign investment, building research infrastructure capabilities, and linking our own capabilities to the rest of the continent, and strengthen not only the Pan-African, but also South-to-South cooperation. And then ensure that we build synergies between innovation partnerships and international trade. Establishing and securing new markets access will be vitally important for us as we move forward, and innovation will have a big role to play. Thank you. So maybe let me end here, Oscar, by saying that, as I said, the last key element of the decadal plan is the introduction of new governance arrangements or systems, which we hope will strengthen our system. So we are setting up, in fact, we've held the first interministerial committee on science, technology, and innovation. It has already met twice. and we see it as a vital key component of where we are moving. The next one, which will meet next year, our president will convene a plenary, which is going to be a key feature of our agenda moving forward. He's going to convene a meeting with business leaders, higher education leaders, government leaders, civil society leaders. At the heart of these governance arrangements is STI. And we will need to be able at some point to go to these platforms and indicate what priorities that South Africa should be focusing on. So foresight is going to be playing a big role, not only in shaping what government does, but also trying to influence what the private sector strategy and choices, investment choices should be around research and innovation, as well as beginning to influence the way in which civil society embraces and looks at innovation challenges. And of course, universities that have to prioritize basic research, but at the same time, make sure that they also undertake some strategic or applied research would also benefit from participation in this new governance. And then the third and the last dimension is around improving the investment climate of the STI systems. And again, it's going to be important to constantly appraise the system in terms of the global trends and national trends that are relevant relevant to the funding climate. And we strongly believe that as we would be institutionalizing foresight capability, these governance arrangements will also derive enjoyable benefits. Thank you very much, colleagues. For your attention.
Mulungisi, thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation. I greatly appreciate it. Actually, this is the case which I'm really proud of myself as a foresight researcher, practitioner, because it clearly shows some impact, real impact. I mean, I'm really glad to see that the results are taken by the policy makers and they are followed up in many different directions, and the implementation process is ongoing. So what else you would ask for? So hopefully, yes, in South Africa also the foresight capacity will be built so that these activities will be ongoing while the implementation process is on its way, and we will already start preparing for the next round, because the world is changing actually very fast. So as we were discussing earlier, foresight definitely should be there on our agenda most of the time. So it shouldn't be one-off, or it shouldn't have long intervals. So we should open our radars and look at the horizon and see what is emerging there, what opportunities, threats, to be able to take some timely actions. So I greatly appreciate your presentation. Thank you very much. Is there any question or comment from the audience for Mulungisi's presentation? I see a hand here. So, Alexander's hand. Okay, it's a familiar hand. I was thinking whose hand it was.
Mulungisi, it's very good to see you. Yeah. I would love to see you in Moscow. Actually, in fact, it would be much better. But even like this, I enjoyed very much with your presentation. That's all. I would repeat, Ozdchan, that we are very proud, really. But even more than I'm proud, you feel kind of satisfaction out of your work. This is very important. And when you see that somebody really uses your results, it's a great feeling. Yeah. So thank you very much. And I hope that we can continue this, and maybe we can do something more, okay, in the future. And by the way, you didn't attend the last workshop, which was devoted to BRICS, where you should present, in fact. Yeah. And Valdir Elmira, he, in the end of this session, he proposed that we should do some kind of a joint activity, some joint project about future of BRICS, whatever, science, technology, and BRICS, or something of this kind. So if you if you would think about this, we could discuss maybe later this idea and probably to arrange something together, which would be very good. Thank you.
I'll fully support that.
Mm.
And next year we'll be chairing BRICS, so this could be a big agenda item. For next year, I'll be keenly interested to participate.
Yeah. Okay, and the year after, we will be chairing. Russia will be chairing BRICS in 2024.
Yeah.
Yeah, so probably we can arrange something on the border or in 2 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the preparations should be underway already, I guess, sometime soon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so, if there's not any more comments or questions, I would like to thank to our speakers, Jonathan Kэлоf, Jean-Paul Pinto,